I really purposely wanted to start just with a little bit about a great passion of mine, because I am going to make some business comments. But the truth of it is, one of the biggest impacts that Ridley College had on my life was really our Latin motto, terra dum prosum. And we all know what that means. May we be consumed in service. And it goes back clearly to kind of people who gave their lives in World War I and World War II and other conflicts. And that is the ultimate expression of being consumed in service, obviously. In today's world, it can mean certainly our armed forces, but it more hopefully means what people do day to day for the community. And it was something that really, fortunately for me, was ingrained in me when I felt it before I came to the school, but really took on a new level. And my perspective was, if I can ever be as successful as I'd like to be in life, then I'd like to be able to give back in whatever way I can. Now, and obviously some people are able to give back with a checkbook, and other people can give back with their time and energy. This particular initiative was born in 1998, and I'd spent most of my career focused on financing technology companies. And so I happened to know executives from the technology companies in Canada. And I sat down with the top executive at IBM, and I said, would you be prepared to give 100 computers for free? And we're going to go and try to work with, which we did, the school boards and the police in Toronto. That's where I ended up moving after going from Ridley to university into Toronto, and providing to financially disadvantaged kids home computing technology. And the interesting thing is, back 15 years ago, in the tougher parts of Toronto, probably about 3/4 of the kids did not have home computing technology. Today, that number is much, much lower. It's probably only about 15%. So on one hand, that's great news, but if you're one of the 15% and you're in grade 7 and you don't have home computing technology, you can't even do your homework. And I suspect most of the kids in this room would appreciate that. And so the objective is to level the playing field for these kids. And as you can see by Chief Blair's remarks, it's part of his preventative policing philosophy. So I just wanted to share with you, is that if you took one message from my love of this school and the impact it had on me, and it continues to have, is terra dum prosum, and this being an example, Merry-Go-Round Children's Foundation, and our program called Kids, Cops, and Computers, and how much I believe in it, and how enriching it is to me. And Ed said, kind of after the pride of my children, my favorite thing to do in the whole world is to be on the chairlift with my kids and go skiing with them, or go water skiing with my kids. But the second greatest moments of my life are leaving one of the schools, and these are in the tougher neighborhoods in Toronto, and you got a feel for kind of the composition of the kids. And often their parents are there, we're giving them these brand new computers, and one of the parents will put up their hand and literally use the words, what's the catch? And there is no catch. It's really about trying to help level the playing field for those kids. And I leave, I get in my car, and I just have this great feeling that maybe one day, many of these kids will be able to give back as they are successful as well. So thank you for indulging me and letting me show that video and speak for a minute or two about Kids, Cops, and Computer. I wanted to share with you my happiest Ridley moment. And it wasn't difficult to even think about it. My happiest Ridley moment was one moment. It was at the time, and it's been that way ever since. But to kind of set up what happened, I need to take you back to when I was kind of in grade 9-ish, and I was not the most skilled athletic kid. I played house league hockey. I grew up in St. Catharines, and I was at Sir Winston Churchill at the time, and I was a pretty scrawny kid, and I never thought that I could be hugely successful in sports. I remember, the kind of pinnacle of my athletic capabilities as a young person was getting a 4th in a high jumping competition, and back then they didn't give ribbons for 4th. I think today you get a ribbon for everything, don't you? But back then I didn't. And I came to Ridley with modest aspirations about what I could accomplish from an athletic perspective. And in grade 13, I started the hockey season on the second team, and kind of 2 weeks into it, this guy came up to me after one of our hockey games, and he said, "Dennis Hall wants to see you." Now for the kids, Dennis Hall was the brother of Bobby Hull. Bobby Hull being one of the greatest hockey players of all time. You guys might remember Brett Hull, his son, who I think is the 4th highest scorer of all time. And Dennis Hull was Bobby's brother, also in the NHL, often regarded as the hardest shot in the history of the National Hockey League, scored 39 goals one season, and he was the coach of the Ridley first team hockey. So think about that. Here was this NHL player, Dennis Hull, and this kid came up to me who I knew and said, "Dennis Hull wants to see you." And I truly thought he was playing a practical joke on me. You know, there was a lot of practical jokes that took place around the school, and I thought I was going to walk down the hall and Dennis Hull was going to say, what the heck are you doing here? Fortunately, it wasn't. And that moment, Dennis Hull said, "Kid, I'm drafting you up to first team hockey." And that was my happiest moment in my Ridley years. As it turned out, the grade 9 kid, I was in grade 13 at the time, which of course we don't have anymore, a grade 9 young guy named Graham Stanley, whose family had a long history with Ridley. His father was one of the masters here for years, and his brother came as well. Graham was in grade 9, and he was our first line center. He could skate circles around me and most of the players on our team, but I was just happy, tremendously happy to be on the team. And so, not sure which, whether you've already got a happiest moment of having been at Ridley, but that was certainly mine and has stuck with me ever since. 2 seconds stepping back about my background. I grew up in St. Catharines, as I mentioned. My mother, her parents, my grandparents, Headmaster Kidd kindly mentioned a couple of bursaries that I'd started in the names of my maternal, my mother's mother and father. They grew up in St. Catharines, and they had long roots here. They'd moved here after World War II, and my grandmother's father was an engineer. He lived in Grimsby, and my grandfather's father worked at a place called Welland Vale, that for the kids, none of you would remember Welland Vale. And my grandfather ended up being in the accounting business, and he worked for the same company as well. When my mother went to university, which was the University of Western Ontario, she'd been kind of brought up in a pretty disciplined environment, and she kind of let loose a little bit. And I was conceived in first year university at Western, and my mother was 19 years old when I was born. And she then moved back to St. Catharines to be supported by her parents. And I spent from basically age 2 until university in St. Catharines, and moved around the city, and we lived in several different apartments and duplexes, none of which we owned. And my mom, to her credit, became a high school teacher as a young person. Later in life, she ended up going back. She got her master's degree. She got her PhD in education. And in fact, she is tonight teaching at Brock University, where she is a professor. And she's written, I think it's 9 or 10 books now that have been translated into 9 or 10 languages. So I'm very, very proud of my mother. And, I mentioned kind of being the scrawny kid in athletics, but one thing I was really keen to hustle and to try to make a mark, even make money, because we were on a very, very thin budget. My first job, I was 9 years old, and I sold programs at Mandeville Speedway. Just south of St. Catharines. The Friesen family were close family friends. And Stan Friesen gave me a chance, and we were making 5 cents per program. And you could make, if you really hustled, about $10 on a night, and that was beyond comprehension. I got a big, big promotion when I was 12 years old and moved into the popcorn booth. And I was a good popcorn guy. And then my big break came when I was 15 years old, and my voice was still breaking, and it was the first stock car night of the season. And Stan Friesen came busting into the popcorn booth, and he said, "Scotty, you've always wanted to be an announcer. Our assistant track announcer just quit. Get up to the booth." And it was amazing. I ran up to the booth, and for the whole year, I got everybody's names wrong and their cities wrong. And wives would come up to the booth and say, "We're from North Tonawanda, not East Tonawanda." I did my best to get it right after time, but it was such a great, amazing opportunity. At this point, what happened in about grade 10, I was starting to become somewhat mischievous. Now, not Rob Ford mischievous, just modestly mischievous. And my mother said to me one day, if you don't smarten up, you're going to go to Ridley. Now, it was a pretty seminal moment in my life because that was something that was unattainable. It was simply something, well, that's where the elite kids go. Well, that's where you have to have a lot of money. Well, that's where, the scions of society go. It was this place, notwithstanding being in St. Catharines, but it truly, from the mindset that I had growing up, was an unattainable dream for me. And what happened was my mother sacrificed tremendously. She emptied her bank account, her father supported, and I was the beneficiary of bursaries, which is one of the reasons I was so keen to start a couple of bursaries when I came back. And when I came, notwithstanding the Dennis Hall story being the happiest moment of my life, the bottom line is the school changed my life. Even though I was only here for 2 years and I was a day student, it changed my life. It exposed me to discipline and tradition and cadets and sports and deep relationships. It was an amazingly transformative event for me.